طيب السلام عليكم. Okay, Sir John, the mic is yours. The second segment, 15 minutes. Okay, our brother have been taken 1 minute extra, so your time will be 16 minutes. Okay, 16 minutes. You might start, please. أرجو من الإخوة إنهم يوزعوا دعوات إن شاء الله. Mic is yours, Reverend John. Reverend John. Mr. John C. Rankin. Can you hear me? The mic is yours. Second segment, 16 minutes. The mic is yours, please. Reverend John, can you hear me? No, I wasn't talking. The mic is yours. Double click on push to talk. Double click on push to talk to take the mic. The mic is yours, please.
Okay, can you hear me now? I am talking as I was before. Oh, good. Okay, very good. Well, it didn't come through the last few times. Thank you so much. Okay, well, Wesam, thank you very much. In terms of John chapter 8, 1 through 12, if you'd really like to, I'll refer you to Dr. Gordon Hugelberger, professor of Hebrew up at Gordon Commonwealth Theological Seminary and pastor of Park Street Church in Boston, who's done excellent exegetical work on that exact text to show that it's part of the original written Word of God. But let's have some fun here and take a look at the issue you raised about the Genesis chapters 1 and 2 and whether or not they are contradictory. But first of all, let me make a simple observation. When I started my comments earlier, I said that the way to understand the Bible on its own terms is to understand creation, sin, and redemption. I said that the biblical order of creation, that is Genesis 1 and 2, is entirely good. I said that beginning in chapter 3, all the way through to Revelation chapter 20, you have evil. And then in the last evil and the war against evil of redemption as God sends prophets and ultimately Jesus as the Son of God. In the last two chapters of Revelation, we had the celebration of all the evil being abolished. So you made a false contrast. When you took Genesis 1:31 and God saw all that he had made, and behold, it was very good, then you mentioned Genesis chapter 6, where God was displeased with the evil he saw. Well, of course, because Genesis chapter 6 is once the evil has begun. But everything in Genesis 1 and 2 is good, and that was my point, and your contrast with Genesis 6 only underscores the diagnosis that evil began in Genesis chapter 3. But let's look for a moment at Genesis chapters 1 and 2. And here's the crucial element about understanding the Bible on its own terms. Genesis chapter 1, the language used is of Elohim, the Creator. Elohim is used throughout the entire Hebrew Bible as the God of creation. And Genesis chapter 1 is the grand design. In Genesis chapter 2, we have the first covenant with the first man and the first woman, and the name used is Yahweh Elohim. Yahweh is the covenant-making God, and all the way throughout the Bible, Elohim is used in reference to the Creator, and Yahweh is used in reference to the Creator who has a personal name. That is Yahweh, who makes covenant with us. Therefore, what happens is, in Genesis 1, we have the grand design, days 1 through 6 in the theological order, and then the seventh day of God's rest. If you look closely, Genesis chapter 2 is the first promise made by God to man and woman on the sixth day. Therefore, everything is happening in Genesis 2. Everything that's happening there is happening in the sixth day of Genesis chapter 1. Now, you brought up some questions about animals made before man, man before animals. The fourth day, the sun made light on the first day. And here's important that we understand Hebrew. Let me talk a little bit about Hebrew and the order of creation in Genesis 1. But before I do, I want to make note of 7 major theories that are out there concerning the nature of the days of creation. The atheist believes this is all mythology, so he doesn't care. That's theory number 1. Theory number 2 is the evolutionary theist, the person who believes that God used evolution, and I don't believe that. But those who do believe it, they then tend to render Genesis chapter 1 as metaphor or mythology. I do not agree with that. The third position is people who believe that God used a whole bunch of time between Genesis 1, 1, and 2 to make the ancient animals the old part of the universe, and then made man in 6 24-hour days more recently. That's called the gap theory. I don't believe that. That's not in the text. Number 4 are the people who believe that the days of creation are long periods of time. And, of course, the Hebrew word for day, yom, can refer to, or in the plural, yamin, can refer to a long period of time in different parts of the Old Testament. But here's the thing. In the Hebrew Bible, context defines the use of the word. And what we have very clearly in Genesis is, and here let's look at the text itself, Genesis 1, 3 through 5. And God said, let there be light, and there was light. God saw that the light was good, and he separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And here's the key verse. And there was evening, and there was morning the first day. So those who try to argue that the days are long periods of time, it doesn't run up to the text right here, or doesn't equal it. The 5th theory is the young earth theory, or the view that the days of creation are 6 24-hour periods. And this is heavily argued in certain cycles. And they'll say, look, evening and morning, the first day. This equals a 24-hour period. However, Wesam, you've raised a very good question. You've said that the sun is not made into the 4th day, and you are correct. And this is one reason I disagree with the people who believe in 6 24-hour periods of creation. I'll come back to that. The 6th theory is Augustine in the 4th century, and he had a good observation, though he didn't know the Hebrew. He said he thinks the days of creation are earthly copies of heavenly realities. Now, I think there's some truth to that, but he didn't know the Hebrew. The 7th understanding of Genesis 1 is known as the framework structure, or the framework theory. And this is what I understand, and this is what I want to talk about in the time I have before me. In all of the Hebrew Bible, 35 to 40% of it is in poetic form. The poetry of the Hebrew Bible is not rhyme and rhythm like so much other poetry in other cultures, but rather it is based on parallelism of thought. You say one thing one way and reflect upon it or build upon it in a parallel way. So just for one simple example. In Psalm 8:4, it says, what is man that you are mindful of him, the Son of Man that you care for him? You put those two verses on top of each other the way they are in the Hebrew text, and you will see that man and Son of Man are parallel. Mindful of and care for are parallel. Now, why did this happen? And I think many Muslims will appreciate this. The Quran is written to be recited, and it has great poetic cadence. Well, in the Hebrew Bible, those who owned the sheepskin and the stylus, in order to write down the written word of God, which was written down thousands of years before Christ, it was too expensive except for the scribes to own. Therefore, the rest of the society, though being literate, had to learn to memorize the Word of God orally. And so putting 40 or 35 or 40% of the Bible into poetic form made it much easier to memorize and to learn. The way they did this was parallelism of thought. Say one thing one way and repeat it or build upon it another way. Now, Genesis 1 is the most unique piece of literature in all of human history in the grand design of creation. And what it does is it gives us a theological purpose for our literal weeks. But it does not argue that the weeks or the days themselves are 24-hour periods. Now, if those of you who are listening, if you have a piece of paper, or you can envision this, I'd like you to do something. Draw a box on a piece of paper and draw a line down the middle, so that from top to bottom. So you have two boxes next to each other. Then draw a line across the top, a line underneath it, and another line. And so what you'll have is you'll have 6 boxes. So you have 3 boxes on your left and 3 boxes on your right. And forgive my telephone for going off. I'll try to stop it from ringing here or ring in the other room. Okay, so you've got the boxes. And you've got 3 boxes on your left and 3 boxes on your right. On the boxes to the left, you write down 1, 2, and 3. So the first box, the second, and the third. Then on your right, you write down 4, 5, and 6. Then underneath all these boxes, you write down number 7. It kind of looks like a window pane. What happens is the boxes on your left write on the top the word rulers, and then, write on the top the word domains. I'm doing the same thing. And above the boxes on the right, write the word rulers. What this is showing is the parallel structure of Genesis 1 and 2, the very way in which the Hebrew text was written. So that in days 1, 2, and 3, on your left-hand column, God makes domains. In the first domain, he makes the kingdom of light, light versus darkness. We've talked about that. On the second day, he makes the domain of waters above and waters below. That is the sky and the sea. And on the third day, he makes the domain of the dry ground that appears. So once these three domains are made, then parallel to days 1, 2, and 3, days 1 and 4 are parallel. 4 is in the upper right-hand box. Days 2 and 5 are parallel. Day 5 is in the right-hand side. And days 3 and 6 are parallel, with 6 on the right-hand side. So on the 4th, 5th, and 6th day, God then makes rulers over those domains. So, for example, on the 4th day, we read the following.